The call came at 11:47 p.m., and I almost didn't answer it. I was already in my car, keys in the ignition, the parking garage under the hospital, so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing 2 floors above me. My shift had ended at 11. I'd been on my feet for 12 hours. My scrubs smelled like antiseptic and cold coffee, and I had a 40-minute drive ahead of me through the kind of February dark that feels less like night and more like the sky pressing down on everything. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. Unknown number. I stared at it for 3 rings. Then I picked up, because in my line of work, unknown numbers at midnight are never good news you can ignore. "Is this Gwen?" A woman's voice. Thin, like she was calling from somewhere far away. "Yes," I said. "Who is this?" Static. A long pause. Then, "Be careful on Route 9 tonight." That was it. The call dropped. I held the phone in my hand and looked at the screen. Call ended, 014. I told myself it was a wrong number, someone trying to reach a different Gwen, some well-meaning person who misdialed and happened to get me. I put the phone down, backed out of my parking spot, and drove toward the exit ramp. I've been a nurse for 11 years. I work overnight shifts in the cardiac unit at St. Clement's, and I drive Route 9 home almost every night. It's a 2-lane state road that cuts through about 15 miles of farmland and low hills before it connects to the highway near my house. At midnight in winter, you can go 20 minutes without seeing another car. I know every bend in that road. I've driven it tired. I've driven it in ice storms. I've driven it so many times that my hands know the turns before my eyes do. I had no reason to go a different way. I took Route 9. For the first 10 minutes, everything was normal. The fields on either side were flat and frozen, the road clear, the sky a deep navy with no moon worth mentioning. My heat was running. The radio was on low, one of those late-night stations that plays Fleetwood Mac and doesn't talk much. I had my window cracked just enough to keep me awake. Then my phone, sitting face up in the cup holder, buzzed. Not a call, a text. I don't read texts while I'm driving. I know better. But when I came to the stop sign at Caldwell Crossing, the intersection about 12 miles out, where I always pause a little too long because there's no street light, and the crossroad is deceiving, I glanced down. The text was from the same unknown number. It said, "Slow down before the bridge." I put the phone back in the cup holder. My heart was doing something unpleasant against my ribs. The bridge. I knew exactly which one. There's only one bridge on Route 9 between Caldwell Crossing and the highway. A narrow 2-lane crossing over Harker Creek, maybe a quarter mile ahead, old concrete guardrails, no shoulders to speak of. In winter, the road surface over that bridge ices before anything else does, because cold air moves underneath from the creek. I told myself, someone has the wrong number. They're trying to warn someone else. This is a coincidence. I let my foot ease off the gas anyway. I don't know why. I just did. The bridge came into view around the curve, lit faintly by my headlights, and I saw it immediately, a shape in the road. A dark smear across the center line, uneven and wrong. I braked hard, the ABS clicking under my foot, and stopped about 30 feet short. A deer. No, 2 deer. One dead in the middle of the lane, one standing in the opposite lane looking at my headlights with its legs locked. The dead one had clearly been hit minutes ago. Its body was directly over the center of the bridge, right where the ice patch always forms. If I had come around that curve at my normal speed, I would have hit it, on an icy bridge with no shoulders. At midnight, I sat there with my hazards going, breathing harder than I should have been, while the living deer eventually spooked and disappeared into the darkness below the bridge railing. I called 911 to report the obstruction. The dispatcher was calm and efficient, and told me an officer would be out within 20 minutes. I pulled forward slowly around the animal, my tires finding better traction than I expected. and I drove the rest of Route 9 at 15 miles under the speed limit with both hands on the wheel. I got home at 12:41. I sat in my driveway for a while before I went inside. My husband was awake when I came in, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and his reading glasses on, which is what he does when he can't sleep and doesn't want to admit it. He looked up when I walked in and said, "You're later than usual." "I had to stop for something on the road," I said. I didn't tell him about the phone calls. Not that night. I wasn't sure how to say it out loud without it sounding like something I'd made up. I went to bed and I lay there in the dark and I thought about that unknown number. The next morning, I called it back. Twice. The first time, it rang 9 times and no one answered. The second time, I got an automated message that said the number was not in service. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds. But here's the thing, I'm not someone who believes in much outside of what I can see on a monitor and confirm with blood work. I went to nursing school, not seminary. I trust data. I trust clinical evidence. I trust the specific, observable weight of facts. What I cannot do is explain that call. I spent the next week trying. I went through every reasonable possibility I could think of. Wrong number from someone who happened to drive Route 9 that night and saw the deer earlier. But the deer was fresh. The blood hadn't even dried on the pavement when I stopped. There wasn't time for someone to see it, get my number somehow, and call me. A prank. But who pranks a stranger with a specific road name and a specific landmark? A coincidence. But the call came in before I'd left the parking garage, before I'd even started the car. I talked to my coworker about it, a woman named Deb who has worked night shifts longer than I have and who is deeply practical about most things. She listened to me go through the whole sequence and then she said, "Gwen, sometimes things happen and they don't fit anywhere. That doesn't mean they didn't happen." That wasn't the answer I was looking for, but it was probably the honest one. Here's what I keep coming back to. 3 nights after the deer incident, I was going through my phone, not looking for anything, just the usual scroll, and I noticed the voicemail icon showing one unheard message. I don't get many voicemails. Most people text. I tapped it. The voicemail was from that night, time-stamped 11:46 p.m., 1 minute before the call I answered. I hadn't checked my voicemail in days. I don't know how I missed it. I pressed play. It was static for the first few seconds. Then, the same voice. The thin woman's voice from the call, but this time she said more than she had on the phone. She said, "Gwen, you don't know me, but I need you to take the long way home tonight. Please, take Pine Hollow Road instead. Will you do that for me?" And then, very quietly, before the message ended, so quiet I had to press the phone against my ear and hold my breath, she said a name. She said my mother's name. My mother died 6 years ago. She had a massive stroke in her sleep and was gone before the ambulance arrived. She never met my husband. She never saw the house we bought. There was no long illness, no goodbye. There was just a phone call from my father at 5 in the morning, and then the rest of my life, without her in it. The woman on the voicemail said her name like she knew her, not her full name, just the name people who loved her used. The shortened version. The version that only people who had actually sat at her kitchen table and drunk her bad coffee would have known to use. I played it 4 more times. I sat on the edge of my bed, and I played it 4 more times. I have the voicemail saved. I've played it for my husband. I've played it for my father, who went very still and then asked me to play it again. Neither of them has an explanation. I'm not telling you it was her. I don't know what it was. I'm a nurse. I am deeply skeptical of things I cannot verify. But I am also someone who stopped her car in front of a dead deer on an icy bridge at midnight because a stranger called from an unregistered number and told her to slow down. And that stranger knew things she shouldn't have known. I've been trying to write this down for months because I think I needed time before I could do it without my hand shaking a little. My husband says I should just let it be what it was. He says not everything needs a clinical explanation and that some things are allowed to just be mysterious. He said this while eating cereal at midnight, which I think undercuts his authority on the subject. But I also think he's probably right. What I know is this: I drove Route 9. I slowed down before the bridge because someone asked me to. I stopped in time. I went home. And somewhere in my voicemail, saved under a number that no longer exists, is a woman's voice saying my mother's nickname in the dark. I don't know what she was. I don't know how she found my number or how she knew what she knew. I've stopped trying to find the answer in any place that answers usually come from. But I'll tell you one thing I've changed since that night. I answer unknown numbers now. Every single one. Because I'm a nurse, and I know better than most people that the line between what's explainable and what isn't is thinner than it looks on paper, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just listen to what's on the other end. My mother always said that. Pay attention when something's trying to get your attention. I think, wherever she is, she'd be pleased that I finally listened. I've thought about that night more times than I can count, and what strikes me most isn't the voice or the deer or even the voicemail. What strikes me is the moment at the stop sign when I almost kept driving, almost talked myself out of it, almost decided that paying attention was less important than getting home fast. That almost is the thing I think about. There's a kind of wisdom that doesn't come from being smart. I've known plenty of smart people who drove straight into disasters they could have avoided because they were too busy explaining away the warning signs to actually listen to them. What I did that night, slowing down, staying open, not dismissing something just because it didn't fit neatly into what I understood. That wasn't intelligence. It was something quieter than that. It was a willingness to take seriously what was being offered, even when I couldn't verify the source. I think my mother had that quality. She wasn't a complicated person. She didn't overthink things the way I do. But she paid attention to people. She paid attention to the room she walked into, to the small signals other people missed, to the difference between what someone said and what they meant. She used to tell me that most people are too loud inside their own heads to hear anything useful from the outside world. I thought that was just something she said. Now I think she was right in a way I didn't have the life experience yet to understand. The honest thing I have to reckon with is this: I almost let my own skepticism get me killed. I almost decided that because something couldn't be explained, it shouldn't be trusted. That's not actually a rational position, it just feels like one. Real clear thinking means staying curious even when you're uncomfortable. It means following the evidence where it goes, not stopping at the edge of what you're willing to consider. And then there's just the sheer stubbornness of keeping going. I drove the rest of Route 9 after I passed that bridge at 15 miles under the limit, hands locked on the wheel, a little shaken, a little spooked, choosing to get home anyway. I went back to work the next shift. I kept doing the job. I didn't stop driving that road. You don't let one terrifying night hollow out your ordinary life. You fold it in, you carry it with you, and you keep moving. That's not bravery, exactly. It's just the decision that fear doesn't get to be the last word. I saved the voicemail. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what it was or where it came from, but I know that it arrived, that I listened, and that I'm here to write this down. Whatever force put those things in sequence, an unknown number, a two-lane bridge, a dead deer, a name only people who loved her used, I'm not going to argue with it. My mother always said, pay attention when something is trying to get your attention. I think that's the whole lesson, honestly. Everything else is just details.